We all have a chapter in our lives we'd rather keep secret. For one man, that chapter was an entire childhood spent in a bleak orphanage. He escaped, conquered the world, and became the kind of powerful man who gets whatever he wants. But the ultimate test of his power is a cruel twist of fate to build his future. He must demolish his past. This is the unbelievable story of how, in order to buy his old orphanage, a rich entrepreneur must face the very girl who helped him escape 30 years ago. And she has no intention of backing down. On one side, you have Keith Snyder, a self-made billionaire, a ruthless tycoon who clawed his way out of poverty to the very top. He sees the world as a balance sheet, and his next target is a decaying old orphanage that stands on $1 billion piece of land. For him, demolishing it isn't just business, it's the final act of burying the painful past he spent a lifetime running from. On the other side, there's Arianna Hughes. She doesn't have money or power. She runs that same orphanage, seeing it not as a relic, but as a sanctuary. Her life's work is to protect the children that the world and men like Keith have forgotten. This is more than just a fight over a piece of land. It's a battle for the very definition of value. Keith believes progress is built by tearing down the old and inefficient to make way for the new and profitable. He sees a decaying relic taking up valuable space. Arianna, however, believes our true strength comes from preserving the places that shelter the vulnerable, that our history is the bedrock of our future. She sees a home filled with stories of survival and hope. Their collision forces us to ask a powerful question. What is worth more, a legacy you can build, or a legacy you can save? The ultimate irony? These two are not strangers. They share a deep, forgotten secret. 30 years ago, they were two scared orphans who planned a daring escape from that very building. And it was Arianna's bravery that set Keith on the path to becoming the man he is today. Now destiny has orchestrated the most emotional and heart-wrenching reunion imaginable. He has returned to destroy the very place that forged him, and she is the only one who can remind him of the boy he left behind and the promise he broke. This isn't just a story about real estate, it's a powerful tale of love, redemption, and a second chance you will not see coming. Before we dive into this incredible story, we want to feel our community and know where you are watching from. Please, let us know in the comments which beautiful city you're in so we can see how far our story has reached. And if you believe in the power of destiny and kindness, do us a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss stories like this, and please, share this video with someone who you think will be touched by it. You see, for a man like Keith Snyder, the world was just a chessboard and he was its undisputed king. This new real estate deal wasn't just another victory, it was the jewel in the crown of his empire, a legacy forged in steel and ambition. The final piece of the puzzle was a rundown property, a forgotten relic he needed to acquire. This incredibly rich entrepreneur saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities, and this old building was definitely a liability standing in the way of progress, a ghost of a forgotten past. The property in question was the St. Jude's Orphanage, a place he knew all too well. Funny how destiny works, isn't it? The very place that forged his grit was now just a line item on a balance sheet, an obstacle to be erased. He felt a cold, grim satisfaction at the thought of tearing it down, of burying the memories deep beneath a skyscraper of glass and success. It was a secret part of his history he never shared, a chapter of overcoming hardship that he desperately wanted to permanently close. Thing is, securing the deal hit an unexpected snag. It wasn't about money he could buy and sell entire city blocks before breakfast. It wasn't a legal problem. His team was the best in the business, capable of turning mountains into dust. No, the obstacle was a person, a single name standing defiantly against his billion-dollar machine. This surprise was both irritating and, if he was honest with himself, a little intriguing. Who on earth had the guts to stand in his way? And just like that, the name landed on his desk and the world tilted on its axis. Arianna Hughes. A name he hadn't heard in 30 years. A whisper from a life he'd fought tooth and nail to forget. This wasn't just an obstacle. This was a reunion of the most unexpected and emotional kind. The girl who held his hand in the dark, the one who orchestrated their escape from that very orphanage. The plot twist was so perfect, it was almost cruel. He leaned back in his leather chair, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of memories. He remembered the splintered fence, the shared fear, the promise Head whispered to her under a blanket of starsa, promise of return, of a better life. A promise broken and buried under years of relentless ambition. Her kindness had been a lantern. In the darkest period of his life, a heart-aching memory he had long since walled off. This was more than a business deal, it was a confrontation with his own past. Well, he thought, this changes things, but not the outcome. He decided he would handle this personally. A quick trip to settle an old score and close a chapter for good. He was a powerful, rich entrepreneur, after all, and she was just a memory. He figured a little bit of money would solve this emotional hiccup and clear the path for his project. He hadn't yet considered that this unexpected reunion could be the start of a very different kind of love story, one demanding redemption. The purr of the engine was a low growl, a sound completely alien to this quiet, forgotten street. Keith Snyder's car, a marvel of engineering and a symbol of his status as a rich entrepreneur, slid to a stop before the weathered gates of the orphanage. He didn't get out right away. Instead, he stared at the peeling paint and the overgrown ivy, seeing not a home but a stubborn blemish on his blueprint for the future. It was just another asset to be liquidated, a ghost from his past that was overstaying its welcome on a prime piece of land. From a second-story window, Arianna Hughes watched the luxury car, its polished surface reflecting the worn-out facade of her world. For her, this place wasn't an asset, it was a sanctuary, a last bastion of hope for children who had nowhere else to turn. Every chipped brick and creaky floorboard told a heart-aching story of survival and overcoming. She had dedicated her life to preserving this haven, fueled by a deep-seated kindness that Keith had long forgotten. This wasn't just a building, it was a promise shed made to herself and to the kids. He finally stepped out, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who owned the world, his eyes scanning the property with a cold, calculating gaze. This was business, plain and simple. The emotional baggage of the place was a liability Head discarded years ago. His focus was on the future, on the gleaming tower that would soon stand here. He believed that progress demanded sacrifices, and the past was always the first thing to be jettisoned. Arianna, meanwhile, felt a different kind of destiny at play. This wasn't a random corporate takeover, it was a reunion 30 years in the making, a collision of two worlds that had once been one. She knew who was in that car. The news of the Snyder Corporation's interest had been a surprise, a plot twist. That felt both terrifying and inevitable. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation. She wasn't just fighting for a building, she was fighting for the very soul of the boy she once knew. For Keith, this was a simple transaction. He was here to remove an obstacle. He failed to see the vibrant life within the old waltz laughter in the hallways, the secret forts built under tables, the children who, just like him, were dreaming of a better tomorrow. He saw only decay and inefficiency, a problem that money could and would solve. He was an entrepreneur who had mastered the art of detachment, a skill learned in the very halls he now planned to destroy. Arianna walked down the stairs, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. She knew the man who had just arrived was a stranger, a rich mogul worlds away from the scared boy she helped escape. But a small hopeful part of her wondered if a glimmer of that boy remained. She knew this meeting wasn't just about the orphanage, it was about a Longo Verdu reckoning. A chance for a redemption he didn't even know he needed. The stage was set for a very different kind of negotiation. They met in the cramped office, a room filled with children's drawings and the scent of old books. Keith Snyder didn't waste time on pleasantries. He slid a sleek tablet across the worn wooden desk, a multi-million-dollar offer glowing on the screen. "This is a more than generous offer," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "It will set you and the children up for life." He saw her as a simple problem, one that a large sum of money could easily solve. For a rich entrepreneur like him, everything had a price tag. He expected gratitude, maybe a few tears, followed by a swift acceptance. It was the logical, sensible thing to do. In his world, loyalty was a commodity, and sentiment was a weakness to be exploited. He was offering a golden ticket out of this decaying orphanage, a fresh start. This was his version of kindness, a clean, efficient transaction that benefited everyone. He leaned back, confident that his checkbook had already won the battle before it had even begun. This was just a formality. But Arianna Hughes didn't even glance at the number on the screen. Her eyes, filled with a strength he hadn't anticipated, were locked on his. "The children's home is not for sale," she said, her voice quiet but unshakable. The refusal was so direct, so absolute, it felt like a physical blow. It was a surprise that short-circuited his brain. He wasn't used to the word no. It simply wasn't a part of his vocabulary or his reality. This was a completely unforeseen plot twist. The silence in the room was deafening. Keith felt a flicker of an unfamiliar feeling, disbelief, quickly followed by irritation. How could she refuse? Didn't she understand how the world worked? "I think you're being a little emotional," he said, his tone condescending. "This is a life-changing amount of money." He simply couldn't comprehend a motivation that wasn't financial. Her loyalty to this place, to these kids, was an alien concept, a variable his calculations had completely missed. It was a secret strength he couldn't measure. She finally looked down, not at the tablet, but at a framed photo on her desk of the current group of children, all of them smiling. "Some things," she said softly, looking back at him, "don't have a price. This is their home, Keith, just like it was once ours." The use of his first name, a relic from their shared past, was a deliberate and powerful move. It was a reminder that this reunion wasn't just business, it was deeply personal. His carefully constructed composure began to crack. He was the master of overcoming obstacles, but this was different. This wasn't a hostile board or a rival company, it was a woman with nothing but conviction. He had come here expecting a swift victory, a simple demolition of a piece of his past. Instead, he was facing a puzzle he couldn't solve, forcing a redemption. Arc he wasn't ready for. The offer was rejected, and for the first time in a long time, the great Keith Snyder had no idea what to do next. Frustration gnawed at Keith as he drove away from the orphanage, the confident stride of the rich entrepreneur gone. Her refusal was illogical, almost insane from his perspective. How could anyone turn down that kind of money for a crumbling building? He slammed his hand on the steering wheel, the controlled facade slipping to reveal a raw, unfamiliar anger. This wasn't supposed to be complicated. Arianna Hughes was supposed to be a ghost from his past, not a gatekeeper to his future. As the city lights streaked by, his mind, against his will, drifted back. The sterile anger gave way to a far more dangerous and emotional current of memory. He remembered the feeling of rough wood against his small hands, the adrenaline of their escape, the secret plan they had whispered about for weeks, the sheer terror and exhilaration of finally breaking free. It was a story of overcoming that he had told himself was his alone, conveniently editing out the most important character. He could almost feel the cold night air, hear the frantic beating of his own heart. And then, clear as day, he saw her face. Arianna, her eyes wide in the moonlight, pushing him through the broken fence first. He remembered her kindness, her fierce bravery. And with that memory came another, one he had buried so deep it was almost gone. A promise. He had grabbed her hand and whispered, "They'll come back for you. He'll make a lot of money, and he'll come back and build us a real home." A forgotten vow from a boy he no longer was. The realization was a surprise, a punch to the gut that was more powerful than her refusal. He had not only forgotten the promise, he had returned to break its very spirit. He was here to destroy the home he had sworn to build. This accidental reunion was turning into a trial, with his own forgotten words as the chief prosecutor. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. Was this destiny's cruel joke? To make him confront the one person he was most indebted to? This memory wasn't heart-aching. It was agonizing. It exposed the chasm between the boy who made the promise and the man who had forgotten it. The rich man who thought money could solve everything was being haunted by a debt that had no price. This wasn't about a real estate deal anymore. It was about a promise, a betrayal, and the girl he had left behind. The plot twist was that the biggest obstacle wasn't Arianna, it was his own forgotten integrity. He pulled the car over, the sprawling city below looking meaningless. Her rejection of his money now made a terrible, painful kind of sense. She wasn't just protecting the orphanage, she was protecting the memory of a promise he had abandoned. He had come to erase his past, but it was rising up to meet him, demanding a reckoning. A path to redemption was appearing before him, but it was shrouded in shame and 30 years of neglect. What could he possibly say to her now? Arianna Hughes knew that a quiet no wouldn't be enough to stop a man like Keith Snyder. He was a force of nature, a rich entrepreneur who bent the world to his will. So she turned to her own source of power, one he could never understand or purchase. She didn't call lawyers or lobbyists, she called neighbors, former residents, and local shop owners. She gathered the community, people whose lives had been touched by the orphanage's quiet kindness over the decades. She was preparing to fight a war, but her weapons were unity and love. The next morning, Keith was greeted not by a call from his legal team, but by a news alert on his phone. A picture of the orphanage, swarming with people. Children held up hand-painted signs that read, "This is our home, and you were a kid once too." It was a colorful, vibrant, and incredibly public protest. It was a heart-aching scene, designed to be anything but a corporate negotiation. Arianna was in the center of it all, not as a warrior, but as a protector, her arm around a small girl. He watched the news coverage, a knot tightening in his stomach. This was a strategic nightmare, a PR disaster in the making. He was being painted as a heartless monster, a Goliath trying to crush a righteous David. This surprise move was brilliant in its simplicity. Arianna was showing him that her power wasn't in a bank account, it was in the web of relationships and the love she had cultivated. This wasn't a battle he could win with brute force. The plot twist was that the fight had moved to an arena where his money was worthless. The protest was a deeply emotional display. Former orphans, now adults with families of their own, gave interviews telling stories of how the orphanage had saved them. They spoke of Arianna's tireless work, of her unwavering dedication. Each story was a testament to a legacy of overcoming that he was threatening to erase. He was trying to tear down a building, but she was showing him he was actually trying to tear down a community's heart. Their reunion was now a public spectacle. He saw the secret genius in her strategy. She had transformed a private real estate dispute into a public moral crusade. She knew his past, and while she didn't reveal it, she used the universal concept of the vulnerable orphan to corner him. It was a move born not of malice, but of a fierce, protective love. She was reminding him and the world that the bonds of human connection are stronger than any contract. This was a lesson he had unlearned on his path to becoming a rich man. The pressure began to mount. This protest wasn't just a nuisance, it was a direct challenge to his identity. He had built his empire on being unstoppable, on the idea that everything was achievable with enough capital and willpower. Now, a woman from his past was derailing his biggest project with bake sales and picket signs. It felt like destiny was forcing him to look at the wreckage he was creating, a first step on an unwanted road to redemption. His next move would be critical. The emergency board meeting was as cold and sterile as the glass tower it was held in. Keith Snyder's partners, men who mirrored his own ambition and ruthlessness, were not pleased. "What is this circus, Keith?" One of them, a man named Sterling, demanded, gesturing to a screen showing the protest. "A bunch of children with crayons are holding up a multi-billion-dollar project. This is unacceptable." They were sharks who smelled blood in the water, and the blood, for the first time, seemed to be his. They didn't care about the orphanage or its history. They saw only a delay, a costly hiccup in a well-oiled machine. "You're the rich entrepreneur who gets things done," another partner chimed in, his voice laced with disdain. "Since when do we let sentiment get in the way of profits? Just bulldoze the damn thing, pay the fines, we've done it before." They were reminding him of the man he was supposed to be, the predator, not the hesitant man they were seeing now. Keith's hesitation was a surprise even to himself. A month ago, he would have agreed without a second thought. He would have crushed this minor rebellion with a flurry of legal orders and a wrecking ball. But Arianna's face, the emotional weight of his forgotten promise, kept intruding. "It's a delicate situation," he said, the words feeling weak even to his own ears. His partners exchanged glances, a silent conversation of doubt passing between them. The great Keith Snyder was going soft. "Delicate?" Sterling scoffed. "Billions are at stake. Our investors are getting nervous. Your personal connection to this place, your past, is becoming a liability." The word liability was a weapon in their world, and they aimed it right at him. They were mocking his sudden, uncharacteristic pause. They saw his connection not as a source of potential redemption, but as a flaw, a weakness that threatened the entire enterprise. The secret of his origin was no longer safe. They pressured him to be the ruthless tycoon they had invested in. "End it, Keith. Use whatever force is necessary. We need that land." The message was clear. His position, his reputation, his empire, it was all on the line. He was at a crossroads, caught between the relentless demands of his present and the unexpected pull of his past. This reunion with Arianna was costing him more than just time. It was costing him his carefully crafted identity. He felt the walls closing in. The pressure from his partners was immense, a familiar force that had driven him his whole life. He had a choice to make: betray the boy he once was, again, and secure his empire, or listen to the faint whisper of a long-forgotten love story and risk losing everything. The plot twist was that the biggest fight wasn't against Arianna or the protesters, but against the very men who had helped him become so rich. His next meeting with her would carry the weight of this ultimatum. The second meeting was in a neutral location, a sterile conference room that felt more like an interrogation chamber. Keith came in hard, armed with legal threats and eviction notices, the words of his partners echoing in his ears. He was the rich entrepreneur again, cold and calculating. "This protest is a foolish emotional stunt, Arianna. It changes nothing. You are trespassing on property that is under contract." He laid out his case, a barrage of corporate jargon designed to intimidate and overwhelm. Arianna didn't flinch. She waited until he was done, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then, with a calm that unnerved him, she began to speak. She didn't talk about contracts or property law. She talked about their past. "Do you remember the winters?" she asked softly. "How the wind would blow through the cracks in the dormitory windows? Do you remember Mrs. Gable's watery soup? And how we used to save our bread from dinner because there was never enough for breakfast?" Each question was a carefully aimed dart, piercing through the armor of his success. He tried to interrupt, to steer the conversation back to business, but she continued, her voice steady and clear. "I remember you crying one night, a secret you told me, because you had a nightmare about being alone forever. We were all terrified of that." She was resurrecting ghosts he had spent a lifetime burying, forcing him to confront the scared, lonely boy he had been. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an excavation of his soul. It was a brilliant, heart-aching strategy. She wasn't appealing to his pity, but to his memory. She was reminding him that the orphanage wasn't just a building, it was a crucible that had forged them. The hardships they faced, the story of their overcoming, was a shared history. A history he was now trying to demolish for profit. The surprise for Keith was how vividly the memories returned, how much they still hurt. He could almost feel the phantom cold from the drafty window. "Those children in there now," Arianna's voice softened with kindness. "They feel that same cold. They have those same fears. That place is the only thing standing between them and being completely alone." She wasn't just the girl from his past, she was the guardian of it, the living embodiment of the life had escaped. This reunion, he was realizing, was a matter of destiny, designed to make him look at the foundation of his own life. He was losing control. The ruthless entrepreneurs, being silenced by the echoes of a forgotten pain. She was showing him that his entire empire was built on the act of forgetting, of severing ties with the very experiences that made him who he was. The plot twist in their conversation was that she wasn't asking for his money or his pity. She was asking for his memory. A path to redemption would require him to first acknowledge the very pain he was trying to erase. Defeated in the negotiation, but not yet ready to surrender, Keith found himself drawn back to the orphanage that evening. He parked down the street, watching from the tinted windows of his car like a ghost observing a life he was no longer part of. The protest was over for the day, and a quiet calm had settled over the old building. He told himself he was just surveying the asset, the rich entrepreneur doing his due diligence, but he was lying. He was drawn by a force he didn't understand. Through the wrought iron fence, he saw a small boy sitting alone on the front steps, his shoulders slumped. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with unruly dark hair and a look of profound loneliness on his face. It was a surprise that felt like a physical shock. It was like looking at a photograph of himself from a forgotten album. He saw his own past reflected in the boy's posture, the same defensiveness, the same quiet desperation. Then, the front door opened and Arianna Hughes stepped out. She didn't seem to have seen Keith's car. She simply sat down on the step next to the boy, not crowding him, just being present. She didn't say anything at first, just shared the silence with him. It was an act of profound, patient kindness. Keith's heart ached with a sudden emotional pang of recognition. He had been that boy, and she had been that girl, offering comfort without words. After a few moments, she spoke softly to the child. Her words too faint for Keith to hear, but he saw the boy's tense shoulders relax. He watched as she pointed up at the stars, the same way she had done with him all those years ago on the night of their escape. It was a heart-aching scene, a moment of pure, unscripted humanity. This was not a performance for the media, this was who she was. The guardian of lonely children, the keeper of a sacred trust. A secret hero. He was witnessing a replay of his own history, a reunion not with Arianna, but with the boy he used to be. The plot twist was that he wasn't seeing a stranger comfort. A child he was seeing Arianna save him over and over again. Her compassion was a constant, a force of nature that had not diminished over 30 years. He had built an empire of steel, but her legacy was built on moments like this, on the quiet overcoming of a child's despair. He finally understood. He couldn't fight her because her cause was righteous, and deep down, it was his own. Destroying the orphanage wasn't just erasing a building, it was invalidating the one act of pure kindness that had set his entire life in motion. The path to redemption was becoming clearer, and it was paved with the terrible, beautiful memories of his past. He started the car, no longer an entrepreneur assessing an asset, but a man haunted by the destiny he had tried to outrun. Driven by an impulse he couldn't explain, Keith arranged a formal tour of the grounds the next day, under the guise of a final property assessment. He walked the familiar paths with a team of surveyors, trying to maintain the detached air of a rich entrepreneur, but his heart wasn't in it. Every corner held a ghost, every tree a memory of his past. He was searching for something, though he wasn't sure what. A piece of himself, perhaps, or a clue to the puzzle that was Arianna Hughes. He eventually broke away from the group, drawn toward the back of the property, near the old woods. He knew this area well. It was the site of their great escape, the pivotal moment of his young life. He expected to find a new, modern fence, the old weaknesses long since repaired. Instead, he found the original, rusted chain-link fence still standing, a testament to the orphanage's meager budget. It was a relic, just like everything else here. And then he saw it. Tucked away behind an overgrown lilac bush was a specific section of the fence. One of the wooden posts was splintered and broken, exactly as they had left it 30 years ago. But this wasn't a sign of neglect. Tied around the broken post was a simple faded yellow ribbon. It was a small, deliberate act of preservation, a secret memorial that only 2 people in the world would understand. It was a surprise that stopped him dead in his tracks. This wasn't just a broken fence, it was a monument, a heart-aching tribute to their bond, to their shared story of overcoming. For 30 years, while he was out building an empire and forgetting her, Arianna had protected this spot. It was a quiet, powerful testament to her loyalty, not just to the orphanage, but to him. The emotional weight of that simple ribbon was heavier than all the billions in his bank account. This was the true nature of their love story. He reached out and touched the splintered wood. This was tangible proof of the past he had tried to deny. Arianna hadn't just stayed behind, she had become a guardian of their history, a keeper of the flame he had tried so hard to extinguish. The plot twist wasn't that she remembered, it was that she had actively, lovingly preserved the evidence of their connection. It was an act of incredible kindness, a message sent across 3 decades. He finally understood the depth of her resolve. She wasn't fighting for a building, she was fighting for the idea that some things are sacred, a promise, a friendship, a shared escape to freedom. This unexpected reunion at this forgotten spot was a turning point. He knew that his path to redemption couldn't be found by tearing this place down. Destiny had brought him back here to show him that the most valuable thing he ever had was something he had left behind, tied with a faded yellow ribbon. Shaken by the discovery at the fence but still trapped by the demands of his partners, Keith Snyder reverted to what he knew best: brute force. He unleashed his legal team, a pack of wolves tasked with finding any loophole, any forgotten clause, to force an eviction. It was a cold, ruthless move, the last desperate act of the cornered entrepreneur. He was at war with himself, and the orphanage was the battleground. He hated himself for it, but the pressure to close the deal was immense. The eviction notice was delivered, a sterile and cruel document that felt like a declaration of war. Keith expected a panicked phone call, tears, a plea for mercy. He was prepared for an emotional outburst. Instead, he got silence. The quiet was more unnerving than any protest. He had deployed his most powerful weapon, the law, and he felt no satisfaction, only a hollow ache. He was actively trying to destroy the last remnant of kindness from his past. 2 days later, in a final meeting he had demanded, Arianna Hughes sat across from him, the eviction notice on the table between them. She looked tired but resolute. "I knew this was coming," she said, her voice calm. "I knew you'd eventually stop fighting with your heart and start fighting with your checkbook." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. She had always seen through him, right back to the boy he was. Her foresight was another surprise he should have expected. "It's over, Arianna," Keith said, trying to sound firm. "The law is the law." She simply slid a thick folder across the table. "It is," she agreed. "And the law also protects history." Inside the folder was an official designation, signed and sealed. She had spent the last year working with the city's historical society. The orphanage, thanks to her efforts, had been granted landmark status 2 weeks ago. It could not be demolished. It was a checkmate he never saw coming. The plot twist was staggering in its brilliance. While he was planning his takeover, she was planning its preservation. She had anticipated his every move, using her knowledge of the system not for profit, but for protection. This wasn't just a victory, it was a masterclass in overcoming overwhelming force with intelligence and dedication. This reunion, this battle of wills, had been won by the person who cared more. Her secret weapon wasn't love this time, it was foresight. He was utterly and completely defeated. The rich mogul had been outmaneuvered by a woman armed with historical documents and an unshakable belief in her cause. His billions were useless. His legal team was impotent. He stared at her, a strange mix of anger, awe, and shame churning inside him. The path to redemption was now blocked by his own foolish aggression, and he had pushed away the one person who represented the best part of his past. He had lost more than a deal, he was losing himself. The empire Keith Snyder had built felt like a cage that night. The victory of the historical designation was hers, but the defeat was entirely his. He wasn't just a failed entrepreneur, he was a man who had lost a war against his own past. Leaving his sterile penthouse, he drove through the sleeping city, the car's headlights cutting a lonely path back to the one place he now knew he couldn't escape: the orphanage. He parked in the shadows, the engine ticking quietly in the silence. He got out and walked to the gate, the cold metal a stark contrast to the emotional storm raging within him. He was a trespasser now, an outsider looking in at the life he had tried to destroy. The moonlight cast long shadows across the yard, and every shadow seemed to hold a memory. He remembered playing hide and seek here, the thrill of hiding, the fear of being found. He remembered sharing a secret apple with Arianna behind the bushes. Overwhelmed, he sank to his knees, the carefully constructed dam of his emotions finally breaking. The tears came, hot and shameful, for the first time in decades. He wasn't crying for the lost deal or the billions in jeopardy. He was crying for the friendship he had abandoned, for the boy who had made a promise and the man who had returned with a wrecking ball. The weight of his betrayal, of 30 years of willful forgetting, pinned crashing down on him. This was the reunion he had been avoiding, not with her, but with himself, with the part of him that knew kindness, loyalty, and love. The rich man was gone, stripped away to reveal the lonely orphan underneath, crying in the dark. It was a heart-aching and pathetic sight, a king brought low by the ghosts of his own making. This was the raw, painful truth of overcoming, not conquering the world, but conquering the darkness within. He thought of her surprise move, the historical designation. It wasn't just a legal strategy, it was an act of preservation. She hadn't just saved a building, she had saved their history. She had saved the past from his own destructive ambition. The plot twist that kept replaying in his mind was that all her actions, from the protest to the landmark status, felt less like attacks on him and more like desperate attempts to make him remember. He stayed there for what felt like hours, a solitary figure shrouded in regret. The road to redemption seemed impossibly long, a journey he didn't know how to begin. He had pushed away the only person who could guide him. His destiny, it seemed, was to be a rich, powerful, and utterly lonely man, haunted by the memory of a girl and a promise. He had nothing left to offer, nothing left to fight with. He was simply lost. A soft click of the gate broke the silence. Keith looked up, his face stained with tears, to see Arianna Hughes walking toward him. There was no "I told you so" in her eyes, no anger or triumph. He braced himself for a lecture, for the righteous fury he so richly deserved. As an entrepreneur, he knew how to handle anger. He had no defense, however, against the expression she wore now, a deep, aching compassion. It was a surprise that disarmed him completely. She stood before him, a silhouette in the moonlight, and for a moment, they were just two kids in the dark again. 30 years of a hard, rich life had vanished, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. She didn't offer a hand or a comforting word. At first, she just saw him, truly saw him, in a way no one had in decades. She saw the lost little boy hiding inside the powerful man. It was an act of profound kindness that felt like a pardon. "Keith," she said, her voice soft, the sound carrying the weight of their entire past. "What are you doing here?" It was a simple question, but it held a world of meaning. He couldn't answer. The words were choked in his throat by a wave of shame. He was the villain in this story, the monster who had tried to destroy her home, her life's work. He had no right to her compassion. This emotional moment was a reckoning he was not prepared for. Instead of pressing him, she sat on the grass a few feet away, her presence a quiet offering of peace. "I'm not angry," she said, as if reading his mind, "and just sad." She paused, then asked the question that shattered what was left of his defenses. "What happened to you? What happened to the boy I used to know, the one who promised he'd come back for me?" It was a heart-aching plea, a question that wasn't about the orphanage, but about his very soul. That question was the ultimate plot twist. She wasn't fighting for a building anymore, she was fighting for him. She saw his pain, his internal struggle. This reunion for her had always been about redemption. His redemption. It was a secret hope she had carried, that somewhere inside the ruthless entrepreneur was the friend she remembered. Her question was an invitation, a chance to find his way back. He finally looked at her, his eyes pleading. "I got no," he whispered. The admission costing him everything. "I think I lost him a long, long time ago." It was the first honest thing he had said since he returned. It was a confession, a surrender. He had been so focused on overcoming his past that he had lost himself in the process. Her compassion was the key, the unexpected turn of destiny that might just unlock the path back. Arianna listened to his broken confession, a deep sadness in her eyes. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was filled with the weight of 30 lost years. Then, she reached into the pocket of her simple cardigan. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if she were handling something sacred. Keith watched, his breath caught in his chest, having no idea what to expect. This entire night had been one surprise after another. What could she possibly have to show him now? She pulled out an old photograph, its edges soft and frayed from years of handling. The black and white image was faded, creased down the middle, but the subjects were unmistakable. It was the two of them. A small, defiant-looking boy with dark, messy hair, and a girl with a bright, hopeful smile, her arm linked through his. They were standing in front of the very orphanage that now stood behind them, a lifetime ago. A ghost of a memory from their shared past. "This is the only thing I have from back then," she said, her voice thick with emotional resonance. "The day before we left, if kept it all this time." She handed the fragile piece of paper to him. His fingers, accustomed to the cold glass of smartphones and the weight of expensive pens, trembled as he took it. It felt like he was holding his own heart, a piece of himself he thought was long gone. It was a heart-aching relic of a forgotten time. He stared at the faces of the children in the photograph. He remembered that day. He remembered the feeling of her arm linked in his, a silent promise of solidarity. He remembered her kindness, a beacon in the bleakness of their young lives. This picture wasn't just a snapshot, it was proof. Proof of their friendship, of their bond, of the innocent beginnings of a love story that had been brutally interrupted by life. It was a secret treasure she had guarded for 3 decades. The plot twist was the sheer power of this small, tattered object. It did what multi-million-dollar deals and legal threats could not. It completely and utterly broke him. This photograph was the physical manifestation of the promise he had forgotten and the boy he had abandoned. It was a testament to her unwavering loyalty. While he was busy becoming a rich entrepreneur, she was holding on to the only thing that mattered: their connection. He couldn't speak. He just stared at the image, at the 2 lost children who had only had each other. The journey of overcoming had taken them on such different paths. His had been a path of acquisition, of building an empire on a foundation of forgetting. Hers had been a path of preservation, of protecting a legacy. This photograph was the bridge between their 2 worlds, a final, undeniable call to redemption from a destiny he could no longer fight. Holding the photograph, Keith felt the last of his defenses crumble into dust. It wasn't just a picture, it was an act of pure, unconditional kindness. Arianna wasn't showing it to him to make him feel guilty. She was showing it to him to remind him of who he was. This simple, heart-aching gesture was the key that unlocked a door he had sealed shut 30 years ago. The rich entrepreneur dissolved, leaving only the orphan boy, ashamed and exposed. "I'm so sorry," he finally choked out, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The confession wasn't for the deal, for the threats, or for the pain he had caused her in the last few weeks. It was a deeper apology, one that spanned 3 decades. "I'm so ashamed. I spent my whole life running from this place, from the boy in this picture. I thought if I became rich enough, powerful enough, I could erase him completely, erase my past." He looked up at her, tears streaming freely down his face now, washing away the years of cold composure. "I forgot," he whispered, the admission a physical pain. "I actually truly forgot the promise I made to you. I buried it under stock prices and corporate takeovers. I forgot the one person who showed me any kindness." The emotional dam had burst, and a torrent of guilt and regret poured out of him. It was the most honest had been in his entire adult life. This was the reunion that mattered. Not the tense negotiations or the public protests, but this raw, painful confession under the stars. The surprise wasn't his tears, but the profound sense of relief that came with them. For the first time, he wasn't overcoming an opponent or a business challenge, he was overcoming his own pride, his own fear. He was letting go of this secret shame that had driven him to become a man he no longer recognized. Arianna didn't say anything. She just listened, her presence a steady anchor in his storm. Her silence was a gift, allowing him the space to finally confront the truth. The plot twist of his life was that his greatest strength, this ability to sever ties and move forward, had become his greatest weakness. It had hollowed him out, leaving him with an empire of things and a poverty of the soul. He had gained the world but lost his own story. "I didn't deserve you," he said, looking from the photograph to her face. "Not then, and not now." This was the bottom, the absolute bedrock of his shame. But in this dark place, a flicker of something new began to stir. The confession, the act of finally telling the truth, wasn't an end. It felt like a beginning. It was the first, agonizing step on the long, uncertain road to redemption, a journey that destiny had forced him to take. As the weight of his confession settled in the quiet night air, a profound realization dawned on Keith. It was a moment of terrifying clarity, a surprise that recontextualized everything. He looked from the tattered photograph to the weathered facade of the orphanage, and he finally understood. All this time, he had seen the building as a symbol of his painful past, a place he needed to erase to complete his story of overcoming. He had been so wrong. The orphanage wasn't the cage he had escaped from. It was an anchor. It was the last surviving piece of his own humanity, and Arianna Hughes had been its faithful guardian. She hadn't just been protecting a building or a group of children. She had been protecting him. She was protecting the memory of the boy who was capable of friendship, loyalty, and hope. A boy who had been buried alive inside the rich entrepreneur. To demolish this place, he now saw, would be a final, unforgivable act of self-destruction. It would be like taking that precious photograph, the only link to the best part of himself, and setting it on fire. It would be the complete and utter betrayal of the kindness she had shown him, not just 30 years ago, but every single day since, by keeping that memory alive. This place wasn't a liability, it was his soul. The entire conflict had been a plot twist orchestrated by destiny. He had come back as a conqueror, intending to bulldoze his origins and build a monument to his success. But the reunion with Arianna had forced him to see the truth. His success was hollow, his power an illusion, because he had severed himself from his own roots. The true story of his life wasn't about a rich man's triumph. It was a love story about a girl who refused to let him forget who he was. This emotional epiphany was both devastating and liberating. The pressure from his partners, the billions of dollars, all of it seemed insignificant now. What was the point of owning the world if it meant annihilating the last piece of his own heart? Arianna had been fighting for him all along, her every action a secret plea for him to remember, to come home to himself. She was trying to facilitate his redemption before he even knew he needed it. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a new kind of awe and gratitude. She had saved him from the worst parts of the orphanage all those years ago. And now she had saved him from the worst part of himself. He finally understood what he had to do. It was a terrifying, risky, and career-ending idea, but it was the only path forward. He had to honor the past, not destroy it. He had to prove he was still, somewhere, the boy in that photograph. The press conference was packed. Journalists, investors, and his own baffled business partners filled the room, expecting the rich entrepreneur to announce a decisive, ruthless victory over the small-town protesters. The air buzzed with anticipation. Keith Snyder, looking calm and resolved, stepped up to the podium. He looked nothing like the cornered executive from the last board meeting. He looked like a man who had finally found his purpose. He started by acknowledging the conflict, the plan to build his corporate headquarters on the land where the St. Jude's orphanage now stood. His partners nodded in approval, ready for the triumphant conclusion. But then came the surprise, the ultimate plot twist that no one saw coming. Effective immediately, Keith announced, his voice clear and strong, "Snyder Corporation is abandoning those plans. The orphanage will not be touched." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. But he was just getting started. This project was born out of a profound misunderstanding of what constitutes value. He continued, his eyes finding Arianna, who stood at the back of the room. "I came back to my hometown to erase a piece of my past. But a remarkable woman, Arianna Hughes, reminded me that our past is not something to be overcome or destroyed. It is the foundation upon which we are built." The emotional weight in his voice was palpable. 30 years ago, he said, his voice now thick with emotion, "Arianna saved me from that orphanage. She showed me a kindness that changed the course of my destiny. And in these past few weeks, she has done it again. She saved me from a man I was becoming, a man who had forgotten the importance of compassion." He then made the announcement that would echo through the financial world. "That is why I am stepping down as CEO and liquidating my assets. I am donating my entire personal fortune," he declared, the room falling into a stunned silence, "to create a new foundation. The Arianna Hughes Foundation, dedicated to protecting and expanding St. Jude's and creating similar sanctuaries for children everywhere." It was an act of redemption so grand, so absolute, it was breathtaking. It was the fulfillment of a promise made by a small boy 30 years ago, a heartaching conclusion to their unique love story. He ended his speech by looking directly at the cameras, but his message was for an audience of one. Arianna Hughes saved my life not once, but twice. It's time I finally started to repay that debt. The rich entrepreneur was gone, replaced by a man who had rediscovered his soul. The secret of his past was now public knowledge, not as a source of shame, but as the prologue to a new and better story. The overcoming was complete. And so, a story that began with a ruthless plan to demolish. The past ended with a beautiful new future being built upon its foundations. Keith Snyder's journey wasn't just about a real estate deal. It was a powerful reminder that our history, no matter how painful, holds the keys to our redemption. It shows that true kindness has the power to break through walls that money and success build around our hearts, and that sometimes destiny brings us back to where we started, not to repeat our mistakes, but to finally heal them. This emotional story of a reunion, a secret promise, and ultimate redemption truly shows that the richest person isn't the one with the most assets, but the one who understands the value of their own humanity. Keith thought he needed to destroy the orphanage to be free, but he learned that honoring it was the only way to save himself. We would love to know, what part of this journey impacted you the most? Was it the quiet strength in Arianna's refusal, the discovery of the memorial at the broken fence, or that final stunning act at the press conference? Share your favorite moment with us in the comments below. And tell us, did you expect an ending like this, or did you have a different outcome in mind? We're always curious to hear if you liked the desfecho presented. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by giving this video a like. It helps us reach more people. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, because we have so many more powerful stories like this one coming up, and you won't want to miss them. While you wait, why not check out some of our older videos? And finally, if you know someone who needs a reminder of the power of kindness and second chances, please share this story with them.